In this video, we are going to be analyzing SpongeBob through an adult lens, not to ruin it, but to understand why it still feels so easy to fall asleep to. Let's get started with the comfort of bright colors. You remember the first time you saw Bikini Bottom. The pinks were soft, the blues were warm, the yellows never hurt your eyes. Nothing was sharp, nothing demanded focus. This was Saturday morning energy, VHS era safety, the kind of world that told you, without words, that nothing bad could happen here. Those colors were not random. They worked like a signal. Bright, simple, looping visuals told your brain that this space was controlled. Safe spaces do not challenge you. They slow you down. Bikini Bottom feels like a core memory because it was designed to feel like one. Every coral looks friendly. Every background hums with reassurance. Even the chaos is clean. You were not asked to analyze. You were invited to relax. And relaxation, when repeated, becomes habit. The music did the same thing. Short loops, familiar notes, sounds that never escalate. The audio never pulls you forward. It rocks you in place, like a fever dream that never turns into a nightmare. When something uncomfortable almost happens, a joke lands. When tension rises, it dissolves. This is not just humor. This is regulation, a system that never lets discomfort finish its sentence. Over time, your brain learns that questioning is unnecessary because resolution always arrives before anxiety settles in. Look at the faces, exaggerated smiles, oversized eyes, emotions so large they stop being complex. SpongeBob does not express confusion. He expresses delight. He does not process pain. He rebounds from it. This is not realism. This is emotional compression. Real emotions take time. These emotions reset instantly. That reset feels good. It creates the illusion that nothing lingers. No trauma, no consequence, just the next scene, clean and bright, waiting for you. You probably never thought of this as a system, because systems are invisible when they work. A safe environment does not announce itself as engineered. It simply feels easy. Easy to watch, easy to trust, easy to leave on while your thoughts slow down after a long day of corporate burnout and low sleep. The more predictable the world becomes, the less energy your brain needs to survive inside it. That is when rest turns into compliance without you ever noticing. This is not an accusation. Nothing here is evil. It is softer than that, more gentle. Comfort, when repeated long enough, becomes instruction. It teaches you when to laugh, when to relax, and when not to ask why. And the strangest part is that you already feel it working. You felt it back then, and you feel it now. As your shoulders drop and your breathing slows, inside a world that never asked you to think, only to stay. And the longer you stay in that world, the more you start to notice the one person who never changes inside it. SpongeBob's happiness does not rise and fall. It does not bend. It does not crack. It stays exactly where it is. Episode after episode, like a dial glued into place. At first, that feels comforting. You remember it as pure joy, childlike joy. But when you watch it now, with adult eyes and adult fatigue, it starts to feel less like a personality and more like a pattern. SpongeBob does not wake up happy. He arrives happy, fully formed, fully charged. His laughter is immediate and predictable, like a reflex tested over time. This is not the kind of happiness that reacts to circumstances. It survives them. Failure does not dent it. Humiliation does not slow it down. Rejection barely registers. Each event lands, slides off, and disappears. Smile, reset, repeat. That rhythm never breaks, and that is where the question begins. In real life, unbroken cheerfulness is rare. It usually shows up where pressure is constant. In high-stress environments, people learn which emotions are allowed and which ones are unsafe. Over time, they adapt. They perform stability because instability costs too much. SpongeBob's optimism looks like that kind of adaptation. Not chosen, but practiced. Not spontaneous, but rehearsed. A response refined through repetition until it feels natural. Think about how often SpongeBob is mocked, ignored, exploited, or dismissed. The show never lingers on these moments, but they happen constantly. Each one should leave a mark. In any other setting, they would. Instead, they dissolve. The laughter arrives on cue, like a safety mechanism activating before awareness can set in. This is not resilience in the heroic sense. This is emotional containment, a way to keep going without stopping long enough to feel what just happened. You can feel the difference if you let yourself slow down. His happiness never deepens. It never matures. It never asks for more. It exists to keep the environment stable. Systems reward what keeps them running smoothly. SpongeBob's cheerfulness absorbs tension before it spreads. It reassures others. It neutralizes conflict. It makes discomfort manageable. That kind of emotional labor is invisible, but it is still labor. This is where the cognitive dissonance settles in. Either SpongeBob is genuinely joyful in every situation, or he has learned that joy is the only safe response available to him. Both cannot be true at the same time. Real joy fluctuates. It rests, it doubts, it grows. SpongeBob's does none of that. It stays locked in place, polished and ready like a uniform he never takes off. None of this makes him weak. It makes him efficient. A personality optimized for survival in a world that does not pause. When you were younger, that constancy felt reassuring. Now, after burnout, after deadlines, after learning how often you are expected to smile through stress, it feels familiar in a different way. Happiness that never fluctuates is not joy. It is regulation. And once you see it, it becomes hard to unsee how calm it makes everything else feel. And that calm spreads outward, not just through SpongeBob, but through the entire town that surrounds him. Bikini Bottom is a place where nothing ever sticks. You can watch a building collapse, a friendship explode, a public disaster unfold, and by the next episode, it is as if none of it happened. Streets are clean again, smiles are reset. Everyone returns to their starting position. This is not simple cartoon logic. This is a system built on forgetting. A town that never remembers never has to change. That is the quiet rule at work here. Conflicts resolve without effort. Damage disappears without repair. Emotional wounds evaporate before they can form scar tissue. You are never asked to hold on to discomfort for more than a few minutes. Fires burn out, trauma dissolves, consequences fade into background noise. The reset arrives right on time, every single time. At first, this feels soothing, especially if you grew up watching this world during Saturday mornings when responsibility felt far away. There is comfort in knowing that nothing you see will matter later. You do not have to track continuity. You do not have to worry about long-term impact. Your brain can relax because memory is optional here. Overthinking has no place to land. But memory is how learning happens. In real life, change requires remembering what hurt. Growth depends on consequences, staying visible long enough to matter. Bikini Bottom offers the opposite. It offers a liminal space where experience never accumulates. Each episode wipes the slate clean. Each relationship resets to baseline. That repetition creates a sense of safety, but it also creates stagnation. You can feel the system working when you slow down and notice how often chaos is allowed because it carries no weight. Destruction is funny when it does not last. Cruelty is harmless when it leaves no trace. The town absorbs everything and records nothing. That is why it feels so light. That is why it feels so easy to return to when your own life feels heavy with emails, deadlines, and decisions that do not reset. Systemic amnesia is powerful because it removes accountability without ever announcing itself. No one has to apologize. No one has to reflect. No one has to sit with the discomfort of what they caused. The past does not follow anyone here. It simply vanishes. And when the past vanishes, so does the pressure to do better next time. This is where the paradox settles in. Either Bikini Bottom is peaceful because nothing bad ever truly happens, or nothing bad ever truly happens because the town refuses to remember it. Both cannot exist in the same reality. Peace built on forgetting is not healing. It is avoidance disguised as harmony. You might recognize the appeal of that. After a long day of adult anxiety and corporate burnout, the idea of a world where nothing carries over can feel like a relief. A place where yesterday cannot haunt you. A place where mistakes evaporate overnight. That relief is real. It is why this world feels like a digital sleeping pill. But there is a quiet cost. A place without memory can never heal because it never admits it was hurt. Bikini Bottom stays calm by staying unaware. And the longer you sit inside that calm, the more you realize how carefully it has been maintained. Not through care, but through forgetting everything that might have asked it to grow. And once you notice how carefully that forgetting is maintained, you start to hear the sound that makes it all possible. Laughter in Bikini Bottom is not just a reaction, it is environmental noise. It fills the space the way air conditioning fills an office. Constant, reliable, always there to regulate the temperature before anything overheats. You remember it immediately. The quick laugh after a fall, the goofy sound effect after an insult, the joke that lands right as a moment starts to feel awkward. That timing is important. Laughter never arrives late here. It never lets discomfort sit long enough to settle into awareness. Just as something might start to feel strange or unfair or painful, the laugh cuts in and smooths the surface. This is not accidental. In real life, silence is where emotions grow teeth. Silence is where you start asking questions. Bikini Bottom almost never allows silence to finish a thought. Humor steps in like a mediator, redirecting attention before the brain can decide what it is feeling. Pain is acknowledged just long enough to be neutralized. Then it is reframed as funny, harmless, done. The effect is subtle but powerful. Laughter tells you how to feel without saying it out loud. It signals that this moment is safe to dismiss, that nothing serious just happened, that you can relax again. Over time, your nervous system learns the pattern. Tension rises, laughter resolves it. Again and again, that rhythm becomes soothing, predictable, almost necessary. You can see how effective it is when you imagine the same scenes without the jokes. A character is humiliated, a boundary is crossed, a failure repeats. Without humor, those moments would linger. They would demand processing. They might even feel uncomfortable enough to challenge the system that keeps producing them. Laughter prevents that. It keeps everything light enough to float away. This is not cruelty. It is efficiency. Humor is one of the cleanest ways to manage emotional load. It compresses complex feelings into something simple and disposable. In Bikini Bottom, laughter works like a release valve. Pressure builds, the joke hits, pressure disappears. No residue, no reflection, no need to revisit what just happened. You might recognize this pattern from your own life. Joking through stress at work, laughing off burnout, making something painful sound small so you can keep moving. It works, at least in the short term. That is why Bikini Bottom feels familiar now in a different way than it did during the VHS era. You understand the function because you have lived it. Every laugh arrives right on time, just before you might have felt something else. Just before sadness could turn into anger. Just before confusion could turn into doubt. The town stays calm, not because nothing hurts, but because humor never lets hurt finish forming. It is always interrupted, redirected, dissolved. There is something almost admirable about how smooth it is. The system does not need force. It does not need rules. It just needs the timing of a joke. That timing keeps everything moving forward without ever stopping to ask where it is going. And as you listen, as the laughter echoes softly in your memory, you can feel how easy it is to stay relaxed in a world that never asked you to sit with anything for too long. And as that laughter fades into the background, something else becomes clear. This world never asks anything from you. Bikini Bottom does not require decisions. It does not demand growth. It does not expect memory. You can arrive exactly as you are, exhausted, overstimulated, burned out from a day that asked too many questions, and nothing here will ask another one. That is why it feels so easy to return to. When your mind is tired, you look for places that remove effort, places where nothing is at stake. Bikini Bottom offers that immediately. The repetition is familiar. The voices are already known. You do not need to learn new rules. You do not need to remember what happened last time. The reset is guaranteed. Whatever happened before has already been forgiven by the system. In your real life, everything carries over. Emails stack, deadlines follow you home. Conversations linger in your head long after the end. Even rest feels productive now, measured and optimized. Bikini Bottom is the opposite of that pressure. It is a liminal space where time folds in on itself, where yesterday does not exist, where tomorrow is identical to today. That sameness is not boring when you are tired. It is relief. Notice how nothing here needs your judgment. You are not asked to pick sides. You are not asked to evaluate motives. You are not asked to solve problems. Conflicts resolve themselves. Emotions reset on their own. Even danger feels symbolic, like a fever dream that never turns serious. Your nervous system recognizes this immediately. Shoulders drop, breathing slows, vigilance shuts off. This is not because the world is simple. It is because the world is contained. Every variable has a limit. Every disruption has an expiration date. Nothing will follow you out of the episode. That promise is consistent. It never breaks. Over time, your body learns to trust it more than your mind does. You might remember falling asleep to this as a kid, the TV glowing softly in a dark room, voices blending into background comfort. Back then, it was innocence. Now, it is something else. Now, it is refuge. A place that feels safe not because it is perfect, but because it refuses to evolve. Nothing here will surprise you in a way that costs energy. That is why the pacing feels the way it does, why scenes loop, Why problems repeat, why characters stay the same. Change requires attention, growth requires tension. Bikini Bottom avoids both. It is designed to hold you, not move you. To occupy your senses just enough that your thoughts stop racing, but not enough to keep you awake. And maybe that is not an accident. Maybe this world endures because it offers something rare in adulthood, a place where you are allowed to disengage without consequences, where you can stop tracking outcomes, where nothing depends on you being better tomorrow. So when you feel your mind slowing as you listen, that is not weakness. That is recognition. You are responding to a system built to feel gentle, built to feel predictable, built to feel like rest. And maybe that is why, when your mind is tired, this world opens its door so easily, asking nothing more than that you stay and let it carry the weight for a while. And once you realize how easily that world holds you, it becomes impossible not to notice where it asks others to stay awake. The Krusty Krab is not just a restaurant. It is a closed system. A small, brightly lit room where time loops, tasks repeat, and nothing ever truly progresses. The doors open in the morning. The doors close at night. And in between, the same motions happen again and again, like a controlled experiment that never publishes its results. You remember it as simple work, flipping burgers, taking orders, cleaning floors, but simplicity is part of the design. Simple tasks are easy to repeat, easy to master, easy to perform without thought. When work never changes, it never challenges the system that created it. The hours blur together. One shift looks exactly like the next. That sameness feels calm on the surface, but it also erases the idea that work could ever be different. SpongeBob thrives here, and that is important. His enthusiasm is not a side effect. It is the desired outcome. Passion replaces compensation. Pride replaces boundaries. He does not ask for more because he has been taught that loving the job is the reward. Every smile is proof that the system is working as intended. When someone enjoys the work this much, there is no need to improve conditions. The happiness becomes a justification. Nothing about this is loud or violent. It is quiet, efficient, comfortable. The Krusty Krab runs smoothly because everyone knows their place and never leaves it. There are no promotions to aspire to, no long-term goals to plan for, just the next order, the next patty, the next shift. Stability replaces growth, and that stability is sold as virtue. You can feel how familiar this is now. The idea that being tired means you are doing something right. That exhaustion becomes an identity. That obedience is reframed as dedication. In this system, questioning the job would disrupt the rhythm. So the rhythm is protected instead. Smiles are encouraged. Complaints are treated like jokes. Discomfort is absorbed and turned into background noise. Mr. Krabs does not need to enforce this aggressively. The system enforces itself. SpongeBob arrives early. He stays late. He takes pride in doing more than asked. That enthusiasm becomes a standard everyone else is measured against. If one worker can be this happy, then unhappiness must be a personal failure, not a structural one. The system stays clean because responsibility is displaced onto the individual. This is why the Krusty Krab feels almost soothing to watch. Everything is contained. Every role is clear. Nothing spills over. You know exactly what will happen when you step inside. In a world where your own job might demand flexibility, constant adaptation, and emotional labor without end, this predictability feels strangely comforting. But comfort does not mean fairness. It just means consistency. The work never ends, but neither does the smile. That balance keeps everything in place. It allows the system to run without friction, without reflection, without change. And that is the quiet logic at the center of it all. If you never question the job never has to change. And once that logic settles in, it becomes easier to understand the figure who benefits from it most. Mr. Krabs is rarely framed as a villain because he does not need to be. He is not an outsider exploiting the system. He is its most successful product. His obsession with money is not hidden. It is announced loudly, repeatedly, almost proudly, until it stops feeling like a flaw and starts feeling like a personality. You are introduced to his greed early, and then you are trained to laugh at it. The jokes soften the edges. His refusal to pay fair wages becomes a punchline. His willingness to cut corners becomes a gag. Over time, the behavior blends into the background like a familiar noise you no longer notice. Greed only becomes a problem when it disrupts comfort. As long as the burgers are served on time and the lights stay on, everything else is treated as acceptable cost. Mr. Krabs does not hoard money in secret. He performs it. He turns accumulation into tradition. Penny pinching becomes heritage. Obsession becomes identity. The system rewards this transparency because it keeps expectations clear. You know exactly what he values, and that clarity makes the exploitation feel honest, almost respectable. There is no gaslighting here, just a blunt message repeated until it sounds normal. This is how authority stabilizes itself, by being predictable. Mr. Krabs never pretends to care more than he does. He does not promise growth or fulfillment, he promises consistency. You will be paid as little as possible. You will work as much as possible. And you will be told through humor that this is just how things are. That honesty is disarming. It lowers resistance. It makes cruelty easier to accept because it never pretends to be kindness. Watch how rarely his behavior is challenged in a way that sticks. Any confrontation dissolves into laughter. Any moral reckoning resets by the next episode. The town allows this because the system functions. Food is produced, jobs exist, the routine holds, stability becomes the highest virtue, and anything that threatens it is treated as inconvenient rather than unethical. You might notice how familiar that feels now. In adult life, certain behaviors are tolerated as long as outcomes are delivered. Exploitation is overlooked if productivity remains high, greed is reframed as ambition, excess becomes evidence of success. The system does not ask whether the distribution is fair, it only asks whether the machine is still running. Mr. Krabs understands this intuitively. He does not need empathy to survive, he needs efficiency. His authority is protected, not because he is kind, but because he is useful. He keeps the doors open, he keeps the routine intact. That makes him untouchable in small but important ways. The brilliance of the design is how little effort it takes to maintain. No speeches, no ideology, just repetition. Every joke reinforces the same lesson. This is normal. This is expected. This is tradition. Over time, tradition stops being questioned. It becomes background truth. And as you sit with that realization, there is no spike of anger, just recognition. A quiet understanding of how systems decide which behaviors to protect. In a stable system, even greed can be rebranded as tradition. And once greed is normalized at the top, the system needs a way to measure loyalty below it. That is where SpongeBob's smile comes in. His happiness is not just a feeling, it is data. It is observed, noticed, and quietly rewarded. In the Krusty Krab, enthusiasm functions like a performance review you never clock out of. The smile is always on, always visible, always working. SpongeBob's joy is consistent enough to become a metric. He is not evaluated by outcomes alone, but by attitude. Burgers can burn, orders can fail. Mistakes are forgiven easily as long as the optimism stays intact. Failure is allowed here, but discouragement is not. The system does not punish inefficiency as harshly as it punishes emotional deviation. As long as SpongeBob remains cheerful, everything else is manageable. This is how happiness becomes currency. It replaces boundaries, it replaces negotiation. When someone gives unlimited enthusiasm, the system never has to ask for it. It simply takes it for granted. SpongeBob does not need to be told to care. He proves it constantly, through tone, posture, and unbreakable positivity. That proof becomes his value. You can feel how narrow the space becomes. There is no room for exhaustion, no language for frustration. Any emotion that might slow production is quietly pushed aside by a grin and a laugh. The system does not demand that SpongeBob feel happy. It demands that he appear happy. Over time, appearance becomes reality because there is no safe alternative. This is not unique to Bikini Bottom. You have seen this before. Jobs where being upbeat matters more than being honest. Workplaces where morale is measured by smiles rather than sustainability. Where saying you are tired feels like admitting failure. SpongeBob's world simply makes that rule visible by exaggerating it until it feels cartoonish and then normal. Notice how often his happiness is acknowledged, praised, used as contrast. He becomes the example, the ideal worker, the one who never complains. That praise reinforces the behavior. It tells him and everyone watching that this is what success looks like. Not rest, not balance, but relentless positivity. The loop tightens here. The more SpongeBob smiles, the more the system rewards him. The more he is rewarded, the more necessary the smile becomes. At some point, it stops being a choice. It becomes an obligation. The smile is no longer something he wears. It is something he owes. This is where sadness turns dangerous. Not because it is disruptive, but because it exposes the cost. Sadness would slow the rhythm. It would introduce friction. It would force a pause, so sadness is treated like an error state, a glitch to be corrected as quickly as possible with humor, reassurance, or reset. You are never asked to judge SpongeBob for this. He is not weak. He is doing exactly what the system trained him to do. He is surviving by excelling at the one thing that is always rewarded. His smile keeps everything running smoothly. And the unsettling part is how familiar that feels. Because when happiness is mandatory, sadness becomes a defect. And in a system like this, defects are not explored. They are smoothed over, corrected, and quietly erased so the work can continue without interruption. And when sadness becomes something to be erased, the system still needs a place to put what cannot be smoothed away. That place is Squidward. He exists as the proof that another response is possible and that choosing it leads nowhere. Squidward remembers wanting more. He remembers art, quiet, dignity, a life not measured in orders and smiles. That memory is what separates him from everyone else, and it is exactly why he suffers. He does not resist loudly, he does not revolt. His resistance is internal. It shows up as boredom, irritation, fatigue, the kind of emotional withdrawal that happens when hope has already been disappointed too many times. Squidward is not angry because anger still believes something can change. He is tired, and that tiredness makes him perfect for the role he plays. Systems like Bikini Bottom need someone like him, a visible dissenter who stays, someone unhappy enough to absorb frustration, but powerless enough to never disrupt their flow. Squidward becomes a container. All the feelings that do not fit into SpongeBob's smile collect around him. His misery gives shape to dissatisfaction without ever allowing it to organize. You are trained to laugh at him the same way you are trained to laugh at Mr. Krabs. His pain becomes familiar, expected, almost comforting in its consistency. Every failed attempt at art, every crushed boundary, every moment of quiet that gets invaded. The repetition turns suffering into background texture. It stops being alarming and starts being routine. This is stabilizing for the system. Squidward shows what happens when you do not perform happiness correctly. He is the cautionary example standing right next to the ideal worker. SpongeBob smiles endlessly and is praised. Squidward frowns quietly and is ignored. The contrast teaches the lesson without ever stating it out loud. Notice how Squidward never truly leaves. He dreams of escape, but he remains. That is important. If he actually succeeded, the system would have to account for the possibility of exit. By keeping him trapped, the system proves that awareness does not equal freedom. You can see the problem clearly and still be unable to change your position. His suffering is not tragic in the way stories usually treat tragedy. There is no build-up, no catharsis, no resolution. It simply continues. That continuity is the point. A tragedy that never resolves becomes part of the landscape. It loses its power to shock and gains power to instruct. You might recognize Squidward now more than you did as a kid. The burnout, the creative frustration, the feeling of being surrounded by systems that reward enthusiasm and punish honesty. He is not the villain. He is the warning label, a reminder placed in plain sight so no one can say they were not told. Every system needs someone like this, someone to fail publicly, not to inspire change, but to discourage it. Squidward's presence makes the system feel complete. There is the happy worker, the greedy owner, and the exhausted dissenter, all roles accountable, all outcomes visible. And because his misery never leads anywhere, it becomes safe to observe. You can sit with it without feeling responsible. You can laugh at it without guilt. The system absorbs his resistance and neutralizes it by repetition. That is why Squidward stays where he is, not because he deserves it and not because he is weak, but because his failure performs a function. It teaches everyone else the cost of wanting something different, without ever needing to say it out loud. And once you see how every role is filled, the system finally presents its question. It does not ask it loudly, it does not demand an answer, it simply sits there, repeating itself quietly, waiting for you to notice. Either SpongeBob loves his job, or he has learned how to survive it. Both cannot be true at the same time. At first, those two ideas feel similar. Loving your job and enduring your job can look identical from the outside. You show up, you perform, you smile. The routine continues. That similarity is what makes the system so effective. It blurs the line until the difference feels irrelevant. But the difference matters, even if the system prefers you not to examine it. If SpongeBob truly loves his work, then the conditions do not matter. Low pay does not matter, long hours do not matter, exploitation does not matter. His joy would exist independently of the environment. It would be internal, self-sustaining, untouched by pressure. That would mean the system is harmless because love makes everything feel voluntary. But if SpongeBob has learned to survive his work, then the smile means something else entirely. It becomes a tool, A coping mechanism refined through repetition. A way to endure monotony, neglect, and exhaustion without breaking down. In that reality, the system is not kind. It is simply efficient at shaping behavior. The system never clarifies which one is true, because clarity would create friction. Instead, it allows both interpretations to exist side by side. You are free to choose the comforting one, the one that lets everything stay light, the one that lets you relax and enjoy the rhythm without questioning the cost. Notice how the question keeps looping back: love or survival, passion or adaptation, fulfillment or endurance. Each version sounds slightly different, but they all circle the same contradiction. If the job is fulfilling, it would not require constant emotional labor. If the job requires constant emotional labor, fulfillment becomes harder to believe. You are not asked to decide this immediately. There is no timer, no pressure. The system does not need your answer tonight. It only needs the question to stay unresolved. An unresolved question does not disrupt routine. It hums quietly in the background, like the sound of the fryers, like the laughter, like the music that never changes. This is where the thought becomes almost soothing. You can feel it rocking back and forth. Maybe he loves it. Maybe he has no other choice. Maybe both feel true depending on the day. That ambiguity allows you to rest without confronting the implications. It keeps the analysis gentle, slow, and optional. You might recognize this logic trap from your own life. Jobs you once loved that slowly taught you endurance. Smiles you learned to wear because they made things easier. Pride that replaced boundaries. The system does not need to convince you that you are happy. It only needs you to keep functioning. The brilliance of the ultimatum is that it never resolves. It just repeats. Episode after episode. Shift after shift. Smile after smile. SpongeBob continues to show up exactly the same way. And the system continues to benefit from that consistency. Whether it is love or survival stops mattering once the outcome is identical. And that is where the question lingers. Not as a demand, but as a quiet presence. Either this work is fulfilling or the system has taught him how to endure it. You do not have to answer right now. You can let the thought drift. Let it slow. Let it fade slightly at the edges. Because in a world built on repetition, unanswered questions are not dangerous. They are calming. They give your mind something to circle without landing, something to hold on to as everything else softens. And as that question rocks gently in the background, the system keeps running, exactly as designed. And as that system keeps running exactly as designed, it surrounds SpongeBob with relationships that make staying in place feel natural. Patrick is the softest example of that. He is never introduced as a problem. He is introduced as comfort, slow speech, simple thoughts, no urgency, no expectations. Being around Patrick feels like exhaling. Patrick does not question anything because nothing in his environment requires questioning. He exists in perfect alignment with the system. There is no friction between who he is and what the world asks of him. That absence of friction looks like peace. It looks like contentment. It looks like safety, and when SpongeBob is with Patrick, that same safety transfers. Notice how little changes when they are together. Plans drift, time stretches, conversations loop, ideas start and dissolve without consequence. There is no pressure to improve, to grow, to move on. Patrick never asks SpongeBob to be more than he already is. He never challenges the routine. He never introduces doubt. His presence reassures SpongeBob that staying the same is not just acceptable, it is shared. This is how stagnation becomes comforting. When stillness is mutual, it stops feeling like failure. It feels like agreement. Growth becomes unnecessary when companionship asks nothing of you. Patrick's lack of awareness is not portrayed as a flaw. It is treated as harmony. He fits perfectly into a world that does not reward reflection. You can feel how soothing that would be, especially as an adult who has been told constantly to optimize, upgrade, and evolve. Patrick offers the opposite. A friend who does not expect progress, a friend who does not measure success, a friend who is always exactly where you left him. That consistency lowers anxiety. It tells your nervous system that nothing bad will happen if you stop moving forward for a while. Patrick's simplicity absorbs complexity. When SpongeBob starts to drift toward awareness, Patrick pulls him gently back into the present moment. Not through force, through absence. There is nothing to analyze when your friend does not analyze. There is nothing to fix when your friend does not notice problems. The system benefits from this kind of friendship because it stabilizes without instruction. This is not ridicule. It is design. Patrick acts as a pressure valve. Any tension that builds inside SpongeBob dissipates when it reaches Patrick's indifference. Worries lose their shape. Questions lose momentum. Everything softens. That softening feels like relief. You might recognize this dynamic from your own life. Friends you grew up with who made you feel safe because nothing ever changed between you. Same jokes, same routines, same conversations on repeat. Being with them felt like stepping back into an earlier version of yourself. That feeling can be comforting, even if it quietly keeps you from becoming someone new. Patrick is not holding SpongeBob back intentionally, he simply does not pull him forward. And in a system that already resists change, that absence of pull is powerful. It reinforces the idea that growth is optional, that awareness is unnecessary, that staying still is just another way to belong. Some friendships are built to help you move, others are built to help you stay. Patrick represents the second kind, a friendship that does not push you forward but keeps you exactly where you are. And in a world designed around repetition and safety, that kind of stillness feels less like stagnation and more like peace. And once that stillness feels like peace, the world allows something else to happen without fear. Chaos. In Bikini Bottom, destruction is not an exception. It is routine, houses are damaged, days are ruined, feelings are hurt, entire plans collapse in minutes. And then quietly, everything resets. By the next episode, the damage is gone, the emotions are gone, the memory is gone. This repetition is important. Chaos happens and then it disappears. Again and again. A home floods, a job is lost, a friendship fractures. Each event should matter. In a world with memory, it would. Here, it does not. The reset arrives reliably. Like a system update that wipes the hard drive clean, nothing carries over. Nothing lingers long enough to require repair. That is why chaos feels safe here. It has no weight. You can watch something burn because you know it will be rebuilt. You can watch someone suffer because you know they will smile again. The certainty of the reset removes anxiety before it can form. Your brain relaxes because it knows there will be no follow-up, no consequences to track, no accountability to hold. The rhythm becomes familiar. Something breaks. Laughter follows. Everything returns to normal. The pattern repeats until it feels natural, predictable, even comforting. Destruction without permanence is entertaining because it does not ask anything from you. You do not need to feel concern. You do not need to reflect. The system has already decided that none of this matters. In real life, chaos is exhausting because it accumulates. Mistakes stack, damage compounds, emotional harm leaves residue. That is what makes it heavy. Bikini Bottom removes that weight entirely. By erasing consequence, it erases responsibility. When nothing sticks, nothing has to be fixed. This does more than entertain, it trains you. It teaches your nervous system that disorder can be observed without stress as long as it resolves itself. Over time, that lesson feels soothing. You stop anticipating fallout. You stop preparing for repair. You let the chaos wash over you, knowing it will pass without effort. There is a quiet trade happening here. Anxiety is lowered, but accountability disappears with it. No one apologizes because there is nothing to apologize for. No one changes behavior because nothing ever follows them. The system remains clean because it never allows mess to stay visible. You might recognize why this feels appealing now. After days filled with consequences, with choices that cannot be undone, a world where nothing lasts feels like relief. A place where mistakes evaporate overnight feels gentle. It offers rest by removing permanence. But permanence is also how meaning forms. When nothing lasts, nothing grows. Chaos without consequence becomes background noise. It stops being alarming. It stops being important. It becomes texture. The brilliance of the design is how calming it feels. You are allowed to watch destruction without carrying it. You are allowed to witness harm without responsibility. Everything resolves itself, always. That promise never breaks. And as you sit with that rhythm, you can feel how easily it lowers your guard, how quickly you accept that nothing needs attention, nothing needs care, nothing needs to change. The chaos is contained, neutralized, forgotten. When nothing sticks, nothing has to be fixed. And in a world built for rest, that absence of obligation feels like peace, even as it quietly removes the very idea that anything could ever be made better. And once chaos feels harmless, the system introduces the idea of escape. Carefully, safely, without ever letting it fully exist. That idea takes the shape of Sandy. She is capable, intelligent, aware in ways the others are not. From the outside, she looks like proof that leaving is possible, that there is another way to live inside this world without being absorbed by it. Sandy arrives with tools, education, ambition. She brings air where there is none. She builds a dome, a controlled pocket of difference, and calls it home. At first glance, it feels like an exit, a sign that awareness leads somewhere else. But the dome is not freedom, it is containment with better branding. Sandy does not leave Bikini Bottom, she adapts to it. Her intelligence allows her to survive comfortably inside the system without ever dismantling it. The dome separates her just enough to feel distinct, but not enough to disrupt anything. She still participates, she still returns, she still plays her role. The system remains untouched. This is an important illusion. It suggests that awareness is enough, that seeing the problem clearly will automatically grant distance from it. But Sandy's life shows something quieter. Intelligence does not break the system, it negotiates with it. It creates tolerable conditions instead of real exits. The dome is a perfect metaphor for this. It looks like separation, but it is still anchored to the same ground. Controlled air, controlled space, controlled difference. Sandy breathes differently, but she lives in the same cycle. Her exception proves the rule rather than challenging it. You are encouraged to admire her for this, to see her as aspirational, smart enough to carve out comfort, strong enough to handle the environment, but notice how little actually changes because of her presence. The system does not bend, it does not learn, it does not evolve, it simply accommodates her in a way that keeps everything else running smoothly. This is where the idea becomes familiar in an uncomfortable way. Many adults reach this stage. You see the system clearly, you understand the exploitation, you recognize the patterns, and instead of escaping, you optimize your position within it. Better coping, better tools, better boundaries. Not freedom, but survivability. Sandy represents that stage perfectly. She is not trapped in ignorance. She is trapped in awareness without exit. Her intelligence makes the environment more tolerable, not less powerful. She can leave her dome, re-enter the system, and return again without consequence. That flexibility feels like control, but it never becomes transformation. The system allows this because it is harmless. A controlled exception does not threaten stability. It actually reinforces it by suggesting that anyone could live better if they were just smart enough. That implication quietly shifts responsibility away from structure and onto individuals. You're not meant to feel angry about this, just thoughtful. Sandy is not failing. She is doing what makes sense inside the limits she is given, but her presence challenges the comforting idea that awareness alone leads to freedom. Sometimes it just leads to better insulation. Even those who see the system clearly can still live inside it. That truth does not come with judgment, it comes with recognition. You can be intelligent, capable, and self-aware and still find yourself circling the same routines, just with better language to describe them. Sandy's dome hums quietly in the background of Bikini Bottom, a reminder that escape is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle enough to feel like freedom while changing almost nothing at all. And with that illusion of escape settled quietly in the background, the system relies on something even softer to keep everything balanced. Friendship, not as healing, not as resolution, but as redistribution. SpongeBob never carries pain alone for very long. The moment something hurts, it is shared, passed around, diluted until it loses its edge. When SpongeBob is disappointed, Patrick is there. When he is embarrassed, someone laughs with him. When something goes wrong, it becomes a group experience. The harm does not disappear. It spreads out, thinned across multiple people until no single person has to hold the full weight of it. That spreading feels like relief. It feels like support. But it also means nothing is ever fully processed. Pain in Bikini Bottom is rarely allowed to stay concentrated. Concentrated pain would demand attention. It would ask for change. Instead, pain is broken into smaller pieces and distributed evenly. Everyone holds a little. No one holds enough to stop the system from continuing. That balance keeps everything moving. You can hear it in the laughter. A bad moment happens and the group absorbs it together. Jokes land, faces reset, the discomfort dissolves into shared noise. This is not denial, it is management. Emotional load balancing. The system does not remove the cause of pain, it simply makes it survivable. This is why friendship feels so essential here. Friends are not there to solve problems. They are there to make problems lighter, to reduce their intensity without addressing their source. SpongeBob does not ask why something hurt him. He brings it to his friends and together they make it small enough to ignore. That process is soothing. You can feel it working. Shared pain feels safer than private pain. It lowers isolation. It reduces fear. It allows you to keep functioning. In small doses, this is healthy. In a system built entirely on repetition, it becomes something else. It becomes maintenance. Nothing ever builds to the point of change because nothing is allowed to stay heavy. Emotional spikes are flattened by companionship. The moment something starts to feel overwhelming, it is redistributed until it becomes manageable. And what is manageable does not require transformation. You might recognize this pattern in your own life. Group chats that turn stress into jokes, friends who help you laugh through burnout, shared complaints that never turn into action. It feels good in the moment. It keeps you going, but it also keeps everything exactly the same. In Bikini Bottom, friendship is not a path out. It is a cushion inside. It absorbs impact. It prevents collapse. That is why it is encouraged. That is why it is constant. SpongeBob is never alone long enough to confront the full weight of his experience. There is always someone nearby to help carry it just enough to survive. This is not framed as a flaw. It is framed as kindness, and it is kind in a limited way, but kindness that only redistributes harm does not remove it. It keeps it circulating, manageable, permanent. The language loops here because the process loops. Pain arrives, pain is shared, pain is softened, pain remains over and over. Nothing ever escalates. Nothing ever resolves. The system stays stable because no single point ever breaks under the strain. That stability feels comforting when you are tired. It feels like being held, but it also means there is never a moment where the full truth of the pain demands something different. Pain shared evenly becomes manageable. And when pain is manageable, it no longer forces change. It becomes part of the background, part of the routine, something you live with instead of something you heal. And as that realization settles gently, without urgency, you can feel how friendship here is not about moving forward or backward. It is about staying functional together, balanced, calm, exactly where the system needs everyone to be. And once that balance feels normal, the system offers another question, just as quietly as the first. It does not rush you. It does not expect clarity. It simply repeats itself in the background, slowly enough that you can rest inside it. Are these friendships healing SpongeBob, or are they keeping him functional? At first, the two ideas feel almost identical. Healing and functioning often look the same from the outside. Someone laughs again, someone shows up the next day. The routine continues. That similarity is what makes the question so gentle and so difficult to resolve. The system relies on that softness. It allows both interpretations to exist without ever forcing a choice. If these friendships are healing SpongeBob, then everything makes sense. Pain is shared, support is offered, community softens the world. Friendship becomes a protective layer that allows him to recover from harm and return stronger. In that version, nothing is wrong. The system is compassionate, the repetition is nurturing, the smiles are real. But if these friendships are keeping him functional, then they serve a different purpose. They do not remove the source of pain. They help him endure it. They make sure he can continue without stopping long enough to ask for something else. In that version, friendship is not an exit. It is insulation. The system never tells you which one is true. It does not need to. It benefits from the ambiguity. Healing and functioning look close enough that no alarm goes off, no urgency appears, everything stays calm, everything stays moving. You can feel how the question loops. Are they saving him or stabilizing him? Supporting him or containing him? Each version sounds reasonable. Each version feels plausible. The contradiction rocks gently, like a thought you do not need to solve right now. This is where the tone softens further. You are not asked to decide. You are not asked to judge these friendships as good or bad. The system does not need your verdict. It only needs the friendships to remain exactly as they are, close enough to feel comforting, limited enough to prevent departure. You might recognize this feeling. Relationships that help you cope without helping you change. Friends who understand your exhaustion but never question the structure that causes it. Conversations that circle the same complaints without ever turning into decisions. It feels supportive. It feels safe. It also feels endless. That endlessness is the key. Healing usually leads somewhere. It creates movement. It changes patterns. Functionality does not. It keeps things stable. It preserves the routine. Bikini Bottom favors stability. So it surrounds SpongeBob with friendships that never escalate beyond maintenance. The question repeats because repetition is how it stays gentle. Are these friendships healing him or keeping him functional? Are they helping him grow or helping him stay? Each time the question returns, it feels a little softer, a little further away, like it is drifting towards sleep with you. No answer arrives. None is required. The system continues to run either way. SpongeBob keeps smiling. Patrick stays close. Sandy returns to her dome. Squidward remains frustrated. Everything holds its shape. Either these friendships save him or they make sure he never leaves. Both interpretations can exist as long as nothing changes. And that unresolved space, that quiet contradiction, is exactly where the system feels most comfortable. You can let the thought linger without landing. Let it float, let it slow. You do not have to solve it tonight. In a world designed around repetition, unanswered questions are not threats. They are part of the rhythm, something to circle gently as everything else stays calm. And as that question fades slightly into the background, the system remains intact, held together by laughter, routine, and relationships that feel warm enough to stay inside, even if they never lead anywhere new. And with that quiet question still drifting in the background, the system reveals what it protects most carefully. SpongeBob never changes. He does not grow older, he does not grow wiser, he does not become more guarded with time. Experiences pass through him the way water passes through sand, leaving no shape behind. At first, this looks like innocence, but when you slow down and stay with it, it begins to look like immobility. Growth usually leaves marks. It creates hesitation, it introduces boundaries. A person who has been hurt learns where to stop. SpongeBob never stops. Every lesson resets. Every failure clears. Every humiliation evaporates. He returns to the same emotional position, perfectly preserved, like something sealed away to prevent wear. That preservation is not accidental, it is required. If SpongeBob were allowed to change, the system would have to change with them. Growth creates friction, friction creates memory, memory creates refusal. SpongeBob has none of these. He does not say no, he does not slow down, he does not protect himself. His personality remains open and unchanged because that openness keeps the environment stable. The tone of this realization is not harsh. It is gentle, almost careful, like noticing something fragile that must not be disturbed. SpongeBob's consistency is treated as something precious, something to be maintained. He is not allowed to harden because hardening would interrupt the rhythm. It would introduce edges where none are permitted. Think about how rare this is in real life. People change because life forces them to. Responsibilities accumulate, disappointments settle in. Optimism becomes selective. SpongeBob avoids all of this, not because he is strong, but because he is contained. The system absorbs every experience before it can transform him. This is where innocence stops being purity and starts being absence. Absence of choice, absence of refusal, absence of self-protection. SpongeBob does not choose to remain the same. The environment chooses for him by never allowing an experience to last long enough to matter. If you are still awake, listening this deep into the timeline, know that it's okay. Sleep will come. You do not need to hold every thought, just let the story carry you. The system needs SpongeBob exactly as he is. A personality that adapts would ask questions. A personality that remembers would hesitate. A personality that changes would eventually want something different. So nothing is allowed to stick. The resets protect him from pain, but they also protect the system from growth. This is why the language around SpongeBob always feels soft, childlike, gentle. He is framed as someone who must be kept safe from change. But safety without choice is not freedom. It is containment disguised as care. A glass case that preserves something by never letting it interact with the world long enough to evolve. You might feel a quiet recognition here. That sense of being frozen in a version of yourself that once worked. A role you learned early that still fits well enough to survive, even if it no longer fits who you could become. SpongeBob embodies that feeling without urgency or alarm. He shows what happens when adaptation is never allowed to finish. A personality that never changes does not mean nothing happens to it. It means everything that happens is removed before it can leave a trace. The system stays calm. The character stays the same. And the cost is invisible because nothing ever breaks loudly enough to demand attention. This is not framed as tragedy. It is framed as maintenance. SpongeBob is kept exactly where he is because that is where he functions best for everyone else. His immobility is treated as innocence. His consistency is treated as virtue. And slowly, gently, you begin to see how something can be protected so carefully that it is never allowed to grow at all. A personality that never changes is not protected. It is contained. And once you see how carefully that sameness is preserved, you begin to notice what is missing underneath it. SpongeBob feels pain, but he never names it. The reaction is immediate. A flinch, a tear, a moment of sadness. And then it passes. Not because it was understood, but because the system moves on before understanding can begin. There is fear in his voice sometimes. There is disappointment. There is confusion, but there are no words attached to those feelings. No language that turns sensation into meaning. SpongeBob experiences harm the way a surface experiences pressure. It registers and then it releases. Nothing settles long enough to become a thought. In real life, pain becomes manageable when it can be named. Naming creates distance. It allows you to say, "This hurt me. This crossed the line. This cannot happen again." SpongeBob never does this. His pain arrives without vocabulary and leaves without instruction. The system resolves discomfort before it can harden into awareness. You can hear how quickly the moment passes. A joke interrupts, a laugh redirects, a reset arrives. The emotion dissolves before it can become a boundary. Over time, that pattern teaches a quiet lesson. Feelings are temporary, hurt is fleeting. Nothing requires response. That lesson keeps everything smooth. This is not ignorance, it is conditioning. When a system never rewards reflection, reflection fades. When pain is never named, it never becomes something you can point to. SpongeBob does not say, "I am being treated unfairly." He does not say, "This makes me feel small." He simply reacts and continues. The absence of language creates a strange kind of calm. Without words, pain cannot organize itself. It cannot demand change. It cannot be shared in a way that asks for accountability. It exists only as a momentary sensation, easily replaced by the next task, the next laugh, the next reset. There is something quietly tragic in that. SpongeBob experiences everything, but understands nothing. Not because he is incapable, but because the environment never gives him time to translate feeling into meaning. Translation takes stillness. Stillness is not allowed to last here. You might recognize this feeling yourself. Being tired but not knowing how to explain it. Being overwhelmed but lacking the language to make it visible. Emotions pass through you without becoming statements. You keep moving because stopping would require naming what hurts. The system benefits from this silence. Unnamed pain cannot be argued with. It cannot become policy. It cannot create boundaries. It simply fades. SpongeBob's lack of vocabulary keeps him open, always available, always adaptable, always ready to absorb the next experience without protest. Notice how often the show resolves discomfort without discussion. There is no aftermath, no conversation, no reflection. The pain is acknowledged just long enough to be neutralized. That neutrality feels peaceful, but it also erases the possibility of learning from what happened. This is how innocence becomes damage without appearing violent. SpongeBob is not denied emotion, he is denied language. And without language, emotion never becomes agency. It never becomes choice. It never becomes refusal. The repetition matters here. Pain arrives, pain passes, pain leaves no trace. Again and again, the rhythm is soothing, predictable, almost comforting. But comfort built on silence carries a cost. If you do not have words for pain, you can never ask for it to stop. You can only endure it until it fades and then wait for it to return in a slightly different shape. SpongeBob lives inside that loop, feeling everything, naming nothing, remaining unchanged because nothing is ever allowed to mean enough to alter him. And as that realization settles gently, without urgency, you can feel how quiet this kind of suffering is. No alarms, no breakdowns, just a constant softness where boundaries should be forming, and a world that continues smoothly because nothing ever asks it to slow down and listen. And that quiet suffering needs something to sit on top of it, something smooth enough to keep everything moving. That is where optimism comes in. SpongeBob's positivity is not spontaneous. It is not a burst of hope that appears and disappears. It is consistent, automatic, and immediate. It arrives before thought, before reflection, before resistance ever has a chance to form. This kind of optimism is learned. It is practiced until it feels natural. In environments where pushing back creates friction, positivity becomes a safer option. It de-escalates situations, it reassures authority, it keeps interactions light enough to avoid conflict. Over time, it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like instinct. SpongeBob's cheerfulness works because it is efficient. The moment something goes wrong, the smile appears. The laugh follows. The situation cools down. Tension never has time to build. Optimism absorbs pressure before it can turn into confrontation. That absorption keeps the system stable without anyone having to say why. Notice how rarely optimism in Bikini Bottom leads to change. It does not challenge unfairness. It does not question conditions. It smooths them over. The goal is not improvement. The goal is continuation. As long as everything stays calm, nothing has to be examined. This is why the positivity feels protective. It shields SpongeBob from escalation. Anger would invite conflict. Sadness would demand attention. Frustration would slow production. Optimism keeps everything moving forward at the same pace. It makes discomfort manageable by making it smaller than it really is. You are never told this is wrong. The tone stays gentle for a reason. In certain environments, optimism is necessary. When resistance is punished or ignored, positivity becomes armor. It keeps you safe enough to survive. It allows you to stay functional without provoking consequences you cannot afford. You might recognize this pattern in your own life, smiling through stress, staying upbeat to avoid tension, reframing problems so they feel lighter than they are. It works, at least in the short term. That is why it is so tempting. That is why it becomes automatic. SpongeBob's optimism never escalates because escalation would require the system to respond. By staying positive, he removes the need for response altogether. Everything remains smooth, predictable, calm. That calm feels like peace, even when it is built on avoidance. The repetition here is important. Optimism appears, conflict dissolves, the moment passes. Again and again. The loop trains everyone involved. This is the safest way to exist here. This is how you avoid standing out. This is how you avoid being seen as a problem. Over time, optimism stops being about hope. Hope looks toward change. This optimism does not. It looks toward stability. It protects the present by refusing to imagine a different future. That refusal keeps the system intact. There is something deeply understandable about this. When change feels impossible, adaptation becomes wisdom. You learn how to move through the system without disturbing it. You learn which emotions are safe to express. You learn which ones must be replaced quickly with a smile. SpongeBob is not naive. He is adaptive. His cheerfulness is a response shaped by repetition, a behavior refined through survival. It keeps him safe, useful, and accepted. It also keeps him exactly where he is. Sometimes positivity is not hope. It is armor. It covers what cannot be said. It protects against consequences that feel too heavy to face. And in a system where resistance goes nowhere, that kind of armor makes sense. As that idea settles softly, you can feel how familiar it is. How many times optimism has helped you get through a day without fixing what made it hard? How often it has been necessary? How rarely it has led to change? The system continues. The smile remains. And everything stays calm because optimism never asks the world to become something different. And with that armor firmly in place, the system offers one more quiet contradiction. It does not announce it. It lets it drift in slowly, the way a thought appears when you are almost asleep. SpongeBob seems untouched by the world around him. Nothing bad appears to affect him for very long. That observation feels comforting, but it leads to a question that does not resolve easily. Either SpongeBob is innocent because nothing bad affects him, or nothing affects him because he is not allowed to grow. Both ideas cannot exist at the same time. One suggests purity, the other suggests restriction. The system never clarifies which one is true, because clarity would break the rhythm. If he is truly untouched, then the world is gentle. Harm bounces off him because it is small, insignificant, almost unreal. In that version, innocence is protection. It keeps him light. It keeps him safe. It keeps the tone calm enough to sleep inside. But if nothing affects him because he is not allowed to grow, then innocence is something else entirely. It becomes absence. Absence of depth, absence of accumulation, absence of the kind of experience that changes a person. In that version, nothing sticks, not because it is harmless, but because the system removes it before it can matter. The question circles back gently. Untouched or unchanging, protected or contained, each version sounds reasonable when you hear it slowly. Each version feels possible. That is what makes the contradiction so soothing. It never demands resolution. Notice how the sentence can be reshaped again and again. Either SpongeBob remains innocent because the world cannot hurt him, or the world cannot hurt him because innocence is enforced. Either he is safe by nature or he is kept safe by design. Each repetition softens the edges. The meaning drifts instead of landing. This is not a puzzle you are meant to solve. It is a rhythm you are meant to sit with, like breathing in and out. Innocence feels gentle. Containment feels quiet. Both feel calm enough to rest inside. You might recognize how this mirrors adulthood in unexpected ways. Feeling unchanged can feel comforting when life is overwhelming. Staying the same can feel safer than becoming someone new. Innocence without exit feels peaceful when growth feels dangerous. The system benefits from this ambiguity. As long as you cannot tell whether innocence is natural or enforced, you do not question it. You simply accept the calm it provides. The lack of exit stops feeling like a problem and starts feeling like stability. The question repeats without urgency. Either he is untouched or he has been taught not to notice. Either nothing harms him or harm is filtered out before it can leave a mark. The repetition slows your thoughts instead of speeding them up. There is no accusation here, no demand that you choose the darker interpretation. The system does not need that. It only needs the contradiction to exist quietly, unresolved, humming in the background. You are allowed to let it drift, to feel the softness of a world where nothing ever fully lands, to recognize how easy it is to rest in a place that never forces change. Innocence without exit feels calm because it removes choice. Choice creates tension, choice creates consequence. Innocence here removes both. That removal feels like peace when you are tired. So the sentence comes back one more time, slower now. Either he is untouched or he has been taught not to notice. You do not have to decide. You can let the words pass through you the way everything passes through SpongeBob. Briefly felt, gently released. The system continues either way. The smile stays in place. The world remains unchanged. And the contradiction settles into the background, steady and quiet, like breathing, like repetition. Like a thought that no longer needs to be finished before you let it go. And once that contradiction settles into stillness, the reason beneath it becomes easier to see. Systems preserve what works, not what is fair, not what is free. What works? SpongeBob works. He absorbs pressure without cracking. He produces joy without asking for credit. He never leaves, never resists, never slows the rhythm down. This is not cruelty, it is optimization. The system does not need to hurt SpongeBob to benefit from him. It only needs to keep him exactly as he is. Unchanged personalities are efficient, they are predictable, they remove uncertainty. SpongeBob's consistency smooths every interaction he touches. He stabilizes the environment simply by being himself. Watch how much he carries without complaint. Stress passes through him and disappears. Conflict dissolves when it reaches him. Other characters bounce off his optimism and return to baseline. He is a buffer, a shock absorber, a way for the system to release pressure without ever redesigning itself. That function is valuable. This is why nothing is allowed to alter him. Change would introduce risk, growth would introduce choice, choice would introduce refusal. The system cannot afford refusal from someone so central to its balance, so it protects him from change the way a machine protects a critical part from wear. The protection looks gentle. It looks like care. It looks like innocence preserved. But preservation and protection are not the same thing as freedom. SpongeBob is kept safe by being kept the same. His openness is guarded because it keeps everything else running smoothly. The repetition matters here. He works again. He works some more. Every time the system is tested, he absorbs the impact. That reliability is rewarded. Not with growth, not with autonomy, with preservation. The system quietly decides that whatever keeps functioning must be maintained at all costs. You can rest inside this realization because it does not demand outrage. It is familiar. You have seen this logic before. In workplaces that rely on the same people to carry emotional labor. In families where one person keeps peace by never changing. In roles you grew into because they worked, and then never left because working became your identity. SpongeBob's usefulness is invisible because it feels positive. He brings joy, he brings energy, he brings stability. Those qualities are celebrated, but they are also harvested. The system does not ask whether he wants to keep giving. It simply assumes he will, because he always has. This is why the system protects him so carefully, not because he is fragile, but because he is essential. A part that never fails is the part you never replace. A role that always works is the role you never allow to evolve. The language slows because the truth here is not sharp. It is soft, almost comforting. SpongeBob is not punished, he is preserved. His lack of change is framed as goodness. His consistency is framed as virtue. And because it feels kind, it is rarely questioned. You are allowed to feel calm here. Nothing is being demanded of you. This is recognition, not accusation. The system does not hate SpongeBob. It depends on him. Dependence looks gentle when it's quiet enough. The repetition continues. He absorbs, he produces, he stays. The system remains stable. Everything keeps running. That is the exchange. No violence, no drama, just optimization. And this is the sentence that brings it all together, softly, without urgency. The system does not protect SpongeBob because he is innocent. It protects him because he is useful. And when you see that usefulness clearly, something else comes into focus quietly, without pressure. The system does not run on its own. It runs because it is watched, because it is returned to, because someone is always there, listening, noticing, staying a little longer. That is where you come in. Not as an accomplice, not as someone to blame, just as a presence. Your attention is gentle, but it matters. Watching becomes participation. Listening becomes maintenance. The world of Bikini Bottom continues because it is observed, because it is allowed to loop again and again inside familiar minds. You are not asked to do anything active. No decisions, no judgments, no interventions. The system does not need effort from you. It only needs consistency. It needs the soft agreement that comes with staying, with letting the episode play, with letting the next one start automatically. This is not a trick. It is a relationship. You bring attention. The world brings comfort. You offer time. The system offers predictability. That exchange is calm, balanced, almost invisible. Nothing is demanded beyond presence. You might notice how natural this feels, especially late at night, especially when your own thoughts feel heavy. Turning on something familiar is not avoidance. It is relief, a way to rest your mind inside a structure that does not change, does not surprise, does not escalate. Bikini Bottom does not ask you to solve its contradictions. It does not ask you to fix its systems. It simply continues softly as long as it is being looked at. That is all it needs, observation without interference. This is why the pacing feels so gentle, why repetition feels soothing instead of boring. The system knows you are there, not to challenge it, but to sit with it, to let it carry you while you stop carrying everything else. Your role is quiet, but it is essential. Without viewers, the loop collapses. Without attention, the world fades. But with even one person watching, listening, letting it play, everything holds its shape. There is no accusation in this, just recognition. You are not doing anything wrong by being here. You are doing something human, seeking familiarity, seeking rest, seeking a place where nothing is required of you except to exist alongside it. This is why the world feels welcoming. It opens its door easily because it knows what you bring. Not effort, not solutions, just attention. And attention is enough to keep everything moving exactly as it always has. The system does not care whether you understand it. Understanding is optional. Awareness is optional. Participation is passive here. You can drift, you can half listen, you can fall asleep. The world will continue either way. And there is something comforting in that, knowing that nothing depends on your choices, that the loop will hold itself as long as you remain nearby. You are not responsible for fixing anything. You are not required to leave. This world only needs one thing from you, to keep watching. Not actively, not critically, just enough to let it stay alive in the background. A presence that does not interrupt. A listener who does not demand change. And as that realization settles in, gently, you can feel how light your role actually is. You are not trapped here. You are simply resting here for a while, letting the system carry itself while you allow your own thoughts to slow, knowing that nothing more is being asked of you tonight. And once you recognize your place in the loop, something loosens. The need to analyze begins to fade. You already understand what is happening here, not in a sharp, intellectual way, but in a quieter one, the kind of understanding that settles into the body instead of staying in the mind. There is nothing left to uncover, no hidden twist waiting deeper in the system. The patterns have already shown themselves. The repetition, the resets, the smiles that never change. You have seen them, and seeing them once is enough. You do not need to keep pulling the thread. This is where recognition replaces curiosity. Curiosity reaches forward. Recognition rests. It says, I know this shape. I have felt this rhythm before. And once you recognize it, there is no urgency left. The world does not need further explanation to be what it is. The language softens here because precision is no longer necessary. Exact meanings begin to blur into feeling. Bright colors, familiar voices, loops that return you to the same emotional place. All of it comes back, not as evidence, but as texture. You can let earlier ideas drift by without holding them. Work as virtue, friendship as containment, innocence as immobility. You do not have to keep them organized. You do not have to decide what they mean. Recognition does not demand structure. It only acknowledges presence. This is the point where thinking stops being useful, not because it was wrong, but because it has done its job. The insight has landed. You can feel it sitting quietly in the background, stable enough to leave alone. Notice how your attention changes when nothing new is being added. The mind relaxes. It stops reaching. It starts observing without effort. The repetition becomes comforting instead of analytical. Sounds and ideas pass through more slowly. This is intentional. Recognition creates space. It allows you to stop holding conclusions tightly. You are allowed to release them now. They will still be there if you need them later. For now, they can rest. You might feel the urge to revisit earlier questions, to check them again, to see if they resolve differently. You do not need to do that. The system does not require closure, it only requires presence. Understanding has already happened. It arrived quietly, without ceremony. And because it is already there, you do not need to keep searching for it. Searching keeps the mind awake. Recognition allows it to settle. The words begin to loop gently now, not to teach but to soothe. The same ideas return, slightly softer each time, like waves that no longer crash, only roll in and out. You already see it now, you do not have to keep looking. You can let the analysis dissolve without losing anything important. The insight stays with you even as your focus loosens. That is the difference between knowing and noticing. Knowing holds on, noticing lets go. And as noticing takes over, your thoughts no longer need to line up or resolve. They can drift, they can overlap, they can slow until they are barely distinct at all. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to prove. The system is what it is. You are where you are. Both can exist without tension. So you let the words pass through you the way everything passes through this world. Briefly noticed, gently released. And in that release, the need to stay alert fades naturally, replaced by the simple comfort of recognizing something familiar and allowing it to be enough. And as that release settles in, the world begins to look familiar again. The colors come back first, soft blues, gentle yellows, the same pinks and greens that never strain your eyes. They are the same colors you saw at the beginning, but they feel different now. Heavier, slower, calmer. Nothing about them has changed, only the way you're seeing them. The laughter returns too. That familiar sound that once felt automatic. It still arrives at the same moments. It still smooths the same edges, but now it feels less like a cue and more like a background hum. Something constant, something predictable. It does not pull your attention anymore. It simply exists, steady and even, like white noise in a quiet room. You hear the familiar voices. The tone never shifts far. The pacing stays gentle. Words repeat. Ideas loop. This is the same rhythm that welcomed you in. The same rhythm that carried you through. It feels almost circular now, like you have arrived back where you started without ever standing up to leave. Nothing in this world has changed. SpongeBob still smiles. The town still resets. Work still repeats. Friendship still absorbs what hurts. Innocence still looks soft and harmless. All of it continues exactly as it always has. The system did not adjust itself because you noticed it. It does not need to. What changed was the framing, the way the pieces sit together in your mind, the way the repetition feels less random and more intentional. But that understanding does not create tension anymore. It settles into familiarity, recognition without urgency. The same scenes pass by again. A joke lands. A mistake resets. The day begins again. And instead of pulling your attention forward, it gently rocks it back and forth. The repetition becomes soothing because you no longer expect it to lead anywhere new. This is the loop closing, not with the conclusion, but with the return. The beginning and the end blur together. Bright colors feel safe again. Laughter feels distant again. The world order feels easy to sit inside again. You might notice how your thoughts respond to this. They stop reaching outward. They stop connecting ideas. They start drifting instead. The same images can repeat without demanding meaning. The same sounds can pass without asking for interpretation. Nothing changed, only how you see it. That sentence feels different now than it did before. At first, it carried weight, insight. Now it carries calm, acceptance, the idea that awareness does not have to disrupt comfort. It can coexist with it. The loop is not a trap here. It is a cradle, something that holds shape without asking you to hold it together. The world keeps turning in place. You do not have to follow it anymore. You can let it spin quietly in the background. The imagery repeats because repetition is what this world does best. It reassures by staying the same. It comforts by refusing to surprise. And now, instead of pulling you into analysis, it invites you back into rest. You have seen the pattern. You have felt the rhythm. And because you have, you no longer need to stay alert. The loop can close without locking you inside it. Colors, laughter, familiar sounds. They return not as clues, but as comfort. The beginning echoes the end, slower and softer, like a thought fading as sleep approaches. Nothing changed, only how you see it. And with that recognition settled gently in place, the world no longer asks for your attention. It simply remains, looping quietly as you let your focus loosen and allow yourself to drift alongside it. carried by something familiar that no longer needs to be understood to feel safe. And as the loop settles into something familiar, the questions gently step aside. You do not need to watch closely anymore. You do not need to stay curious. Bikini Bottom does not require vigilance. It has never needed supervision. It knows how to continue on its own. Everything keeps moving at the same pace whether you are paying attention or not. The lights turn on, the doors open, the routines repeat. The laughter arrives when it always does. The reset follows right behind it. No part of this world depends on you staying alert. That is what makes it safe now. Safety without question. Safety without effort. You are not responsible for tracking patterns or holding ideas together. The system does that for you. It always has. It always will. Nothing here will surprise you in a way that demands energy. Nothing will escalate into something you have to manage. Problems appear and dissolve on schedule. Emotions rise and soften on cue. Even tension feels symbolic, like something you watch pass by rather than something you have to respond to. The world hums along quietly. It does not ask you to participate actively. It does not need decisions or interpretations. It simply continues exactly as it always has. You can feel how little is required of you now. Your role has already been fulfilled. You noticed. You recognized. That is enough. There is no next step, no call to action, no reason to stay awake longer than you want to. Bikini Bottom will keep functioning even if you let go completely, even if your attention drifts, even if your thoughts slow until they are barely thoughts at all. The system is stable. It does not depend on effort. It depends on repetition. The language slows here because nothing needs to be explained anymore. Words become softer, meanings blur, familiar sounds feel distant and gentle like something playing in another room. You do not have to protect this world. You do not have to maintain it. You do not have to understand it further. It is already taken care of. The loop holds itself. This is the kind of safety that comes from predictability, from knowing nothing unexpected will demand your response, from knowing the same shapes and sounds will return no matter how deeply you rest. You might feel your body respond to that reassurance. Breathing deepens, muscles loosen. The part of your mind that stays alert just in case begins to power down. There is nothing to prepare for here. The system does not need you to be ready. It does not need you to be aware. It only needs to exist, and it does that effortlessly. So, you are allowed to rest without fear of missing something important. Nothing important is happening now. Nothing urgent is approaching. The world will look the same when you open your eyes again, whether that is in a moment or much later. The repetition becomes almost like a lullaby. Same motions, same voices, same gentle rhythm. Everything stays where it belongs. It will keep going even if you stop watching closely, even if you stop listening actively, even if you drift somewhere softer and quieter. Bikini Bottom does not collapse when you rest. It does not change when you look away. It simply continues, calm and self-contained, looping in the background like a familiar hum. And knowing that, truly knowing it, you no longer need to hold yourself upright. You no longer need to follow every word. The system has already taken over. You can let your attention sink lower now. Let the sounds blur. Let the images fade. The world will still be there, steady and unchanged, carrying on without question. It will keep going, even if you rest. And now, the world begins to fade in the softest way possible. Not by ending, not by stopping, but by becoming distant. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to connect. Every thought that needed your attention has already had it. Everything else can loosen and drift. Bikini Bottom keeps humming quietly in the background. The same rhythm, the same motion, the same gentle repetition. It no longer asks to be understood. It does not need interpretation anymore. It is just there, steady and familiar, like a sound you fall asleep to without noticing when it started. You can let go of conclusions now. You do not have to hold on to insights or ideas. They do not disappear when you rest. They simply stop asking for energy. Thoughts are allowed to thin out, to slow down, to dissolve one by one without being followed. The repetition becomes softer. Not words anymore, just patterns, familiar shapes, familiar tones, the sense of a world that continues on its own, asking nothing from you in return. That knowledge is enough. It creates a quiet sense of safety that does not need to be explained. Your mind does not need to stay alert. It does not need to listen closely. The system will keep looping whether you notice it or not. You are allowed to drift away from it now, knowing it will still be there, unchanged when you return. Breathing becomes more noticeable than thinking. The space between thoughts stretches. What once felt like analysis now feels like background texture, something far away, something no longer important to track. Bikini Bottom fades the way memories fade when you fall asleep to the television. Voices blur, scenes overlap, nothing demands clarity. Everything blends together into a single, calming presence. You do not need to remember anything you heard. You do not need to keep any of it organized. The story has already done what it needed to do. It carried you here. That is enough. The world grows quieter, not because it is ending, but because you are stepping back from it, like lights dimming slowly, like sounds moving into another room. Nothing is gone. It is simply no longer in focus. And now you can rest inside that softness. Let your thoughts wander without direction. Let them come and go without meaning. The loop continues, but you do not have to follow it anymore. This is the moment where attention releases completely, where curiosity dissolves into comfort, where understanding gives way to rest. And now you don't have to think about it anymore. If you enjoyed our video, subscribe to SpongeBob Sleep Stories for more videos like these.